Well, yes, this is me, dyed hair and all. But I'm using this slide to talk about stress as an example of an experience that actually was very significant to me in terms of understanding stress. So let me back up a bit and tell you just how I got there in that airspace. Quite a while ago, after a long-term marriage ended, I decided to move forward with my life and try to experience things I had never done before. I even had a bucket list, but that wasn't on it, by the way. Anyway, my kids took it as an opportunity, however, to give this to me for my 60th birthday. I think they were actually hoping for an early inheritance. That was a joke. No, really, they did me a really big favor. Okay, so here's the story. I was trained for all of maybe 10 minutes, as far as I remember, on how to skydive. And maybe some of you have skydived before, but this is my experience. The one thing that really worried me was that I had to put my legs up 90 degrees when we landed, because the guy in the back of me had to land on his feet. So when we went into a really small airplane, we were sitting on the floor, a whole bunch of us, and I was second to last. And I had definitely no time to say no now. It was done. It was a fait accompli. Otherwise, the one behind me wouldn't be able to go, and I'm sure they wouldn't like that. So my thoughts were pretty manic, really. I could almost feel the adrenaline coursing through my body. No time to use fight and flight. The freezing was really not practical. So finally, my thoughts, I said to myself, well, you just got to let it go. Let them bring us home. I felt my body let go of some stress, but not all of it. So we edged towards the door on our bums. My feet were hanging out, and he gave me a big push, and wow, the rush of air was like a slap in the face. So hard to breathe. And as I'm gasping for air in this picture, I wonder if I'll make it. I can't breathe at all. Then finally something clicked again, and I let go again, and then I started to breathe again, even though we were just free falling at this point. I could then actually look around and see the ocean and say to myself, oh, how beautiful it was. We landed fine, and I kissed the earth when we got there. I was very happy to be landed. So to me, that was stress exemplified. But it was a good stress in many ways. And actually, I was higher than the kite for many days after, probably from the adrenaline. So what is stress? Well, let's take a look at that. Stress in the dictionary is basically a state of tension that occurs when internal or external demands begin to tax or exceed the resources of the individual. External demands may be something that, going on with your family or relationships or workplace, and pandemics are a big one. I added that to the list. Internal demands include things like that we do to ourselves, our obligations, our self-criticisms, our beliefs, our worry, our awfulizing, our negative thoughts. All those kinds of things cause our stress. We do a lot to ourselves, to be honest with you. Come on. Go next there. Oh, there is a human performance curve, and positive stress is called Eustress, and you probably know all that, but basically jumping out of the airplane was a Eustress for me in a large way. It wasn't too much of a distress. At some points it was a little bit, but in the end it really did turn out to be a very positive experience. So it's sort of like a bell curve. You can go up and perform really well, like athletes, but if you get way too much, you can get really distressed and break down. So if you get too little stress, it might mean that we might not have any reason to get out of bed in the morning. Might be jobless, without motivation, no goals in life, and there may be long periods of living like this may actually lead to emotional disturbances, depression, or maybe attempt to use alcohol and drugs. And this is my dog, by the way, but he's not into drugs, so we're happy with that. The results of too much stress can cause, is a negative stress, is actually chronic stress. It causes our bodies to activate the adrenal glands in excessive adrenaline and cortisol in our body, and causes, in the end, depression, anxiety, a lot of times high blood pressure, heart problems, autoimmune disease, even cancer. They're now finding much more now, more proof of that. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about all these things that stress causes all these things, but now there seems to be much more proof of it. And it's getting closer and closer to that proof. And even arthritis. So there are a lot of symptoms, and if you take a look at that you are in stress, take a look at this slide. And I'm sure all of you have had all these particular symptoms. But if you look at the biological and physiological one, I'm looking at more the increased blood pressure and changes in metabolism, cortisol, adrenaline, and inflammation. Those are the ones that really start to hurt your body. And for me, if I get really stressed, I get inflammation in my knees and my legs really, really badly. And I know that I've got to do something about it. And sometimes that happens without me even being aware that I'm under a lot of stress. So I'm cognizant of my inflammation in my body. And then I start to think, what am I stressed about? Because I know that that's because of that. And then I can start to work on it. So there is a consciousness stress, an awareness of stress, like an iceberg. You can see, you can feel it, you know that you're under stress. And then there's a lot of times that we're unconscious of stress. And a lot of times it can be caused by residue of childhood and trauma. And we push it down, we suppress it, we don't realize it's there, but it's still in the body and the body still reacts to it. The thing is trying to get this unconscious stress into awareness so that we can work it out, work on it and get rid of it. And sometimes we actually can't get rid of it, I think, but we try really hard. So in my work with myself and with all the clients that I had, I think there is a kind of a process of stress involves. When you're feeling something, worried about something and stressful, our thinking causes our emotions. The emotions, we feel them, and their emotions are, sad, worry, scared, all those emotions. And then our emotions tell our bodies how to react. Then our body reacts with your hormones and adrenaline and cortisol coursing through your body. And even unconscious thoughts can do that too. And suppression of emotions can cause even more of that adrenaline, cortisol, and hormones to go through your body. So that causes illnesses, I believe, even more, especially anger. And anger is a big one, especially for suppression of emotion. If you suppress anger, it's really hard on your body. Oops, sorry. So some of the tools that I've used, and we've talked about many times before probably with other presentations, is awareness, but it's really important to be aware of what you're stressed about. Obviously, talking to a friend or a counselor is really helpful in being aware of what your physical sensations are, like I just said previously. Observing your mind, that little voice in your head, because a lot of the times that voice in your head when you're in conflict or in a stressful situation, the voice has usually got negative thoughts. And it's, according to Eckhart Tolle, he says it's almost 90% negative. But take a look at it. It's interesting to watch your thoughts in your head, because I think over the years, I wasn't aware as much of what those negative, I didn't know that I was saying those negative thoughts so much in my head. And now that I do, I certainly have let go a lot of stress because of it. And then the emotions that are caused by those negative thoughts, well, you could start to deal with them. And then also exploring some cultural practices and beliefs such that cause suppression of emotion and can cause a lot of diseases. And one of the things in our culture is that men are really not allowed to express their emotions. They're really not allowed to say or do that kind of thing. They're not allowed to cry still, which doesn't make sense. Of course, I think in our community in Unitarian Church, that's not true, but I still think it's still out there, because I had a lot of clients that were like that. They could not feel those emotions easily. One of the big ones I think as a tool is reframing. And when I was up in the airplane, I think I reframed my whole picture of what was happening. And one of the pictures was that, oh my God, I'm going to die in this skydiving experience. But I basically reframed it and said, no, I'm sorry, but this guy is pretty good at what he's doing. He's going to keep me safe. And I'm going to reframe it so that I am going to think only that this is going to happen and it's going to be wonderful. And I'm going to look around and I'm going to be in the present. All those things will happen, and it will work out okay. Another one is mindfulness, and that's being in the present moment. We talked about that all the time, and that's definitely a great one, and a good one to work with is Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now, is to me one of my Bibles. It allows you to disengage from the mental clutter that you have, and so that you can clear your mind and you can figure out what's going on. The knowledge for me is that stress is actually fear. And when I feel stressed, I also have to ask myself, what am I actually fearing? What is it I fear? And it can be convoluted. It can be really difficult to figure that out sometimes. You don't even realize that you're fearful. You have to figure out why. Why am I fearful? What are the thoughts around my fear? What's the emotion around my fear? Can I let go of it? Can I reframe it? Can I start breathing again? Because one of the things that I do is stop breathing. As a matter of fact, my daughter gave me an Apple Watch, and it tells me constantly, start breathing. It's a great watch, by the way. Anyway, that's my idea of what helps when you have a stressful situation. And I'll give you an example of a situation from a long time ago, which I didn't have all of these ideas or tools in my pocket. And that's the example of this meningitis I had in 1987. I was asked to teach early childhood education at Lambton College. And I had worked in the Sarnia Lambton Center for Children and Youth, the old name for it. I don't know what it's called now. Family Counseling Center before that, but I didn't really actually do much public speaking. So at the time, I was pretty worried about doing some public speaking, and that was public speaking because you're talking to 30 teenagers usually. It's hard to cope with. Anyway, for me it was, and so I took a number of classes and was starting to teach. I'd been trained a little bit at Lambton College. But I was pretty overwhelmed. I had to really force myself to go and do it. And I think I was really stiff, and I think I was really, I wasn't relaxed doing it. So I got, all of a sudden, during the, I think it was first or second week of teaching, I actually got meningitis. At least that's what it was diagnosed as. Whether it was or not is really questionable, because they kept taking spinals from me, even using medical students, which didn't really please me at all. But I did have a temperature of about 106, and that's not a good thing at that time. So they put me into ice water baths, but finally they just couldn't cope with me at Petrolia Hospital and sent me to London Hospital, where I finally recovered. I still believe that stress that I felt for teaching and why I was worried so much about it was why I contracted that illness, whether it was really meningitis or not. I'm really not convinced of that, because they couldn't actually tell me for sure whether that was meningitis or was that my body just reacting. I don't know. So some of the ways that I try to avoid illness is try to become very aware. Become very awareness. Oh dear. Oh, I didn't see that. Stop awfulizing. I have a tendency to awfulize things. That means I say, oh, this is going to be awful. This is going to be terrible. I'm going to project out in the future that it's going to not work out, those kind of things. I have to stop making assumptions that, you know, things are not going to work out. I have to go back and be very present. Say, okay, oh, this is where we are now. I'm just right here now. Let's just cope with what I've got right now. I have to tell my voice and in my brain that the awful stuff hasn't really happened at all. So what the heck am I worried about? And then deal with the fear, express it, but not panic. Identify the fear. And as you identify the fear, quite often it just sort of seems to dissipate, because you'll actually reframe the fear sometimes and feels less fearful, because it doesn't make sense sometimes that you're fearful about something. And then I have to watch my breath as I hold my breath. And I have to definitely learn patience with myself. And also act accordingly for my best interest in wellness, because I can't help anybody else if I'm not good. And if I'm stressed out, I'm useless to anybody else. So I have to be careful with that as far as myself anyway. I don't know how you feel about it. You probably have a lot of other ways too to deal with stress, and I'd love to hear. And we can add some more to the list. It would be great. And we can do that after I finish this. You know, Hans Seil talked about fight and flight, and those are good things to do. The reason you have to have fight and flight, if you get hit by a, you know, like a tiger's running after you, you got to certainly run away. But quite often we'll freeze. And I did that after the brain tumor. I froze for a long time. And freezing can be okay to cope with it, but on the other hand, we cope with bad stuff. But on the other hand, freezing is basically suppression of feelings. And those feelings really need to come out eventually, I think. Otherwise, again, the body feels it. And so it did come out later, but it took quite a while before it did. So there's lots of life events that we can't do anything about. And I actually have a life event scale that I used when I was in counseling. And if there's a whole list of things that they put a value to, like the death of a spouse is about 100, a death of a close family is a 63, the death of a close friend 37, a divorce is 73. So they've valued these things. And a score of 301 year usually leads to very serious health problems. A score of 150 to 350%, and a score and a chance of serious illness in 2 years below 150 is 33%. So yeah, you can kind of get a sense of what's happening in somebody's life, you know, when you're talking to them about what kind of stressors they've got. And so you can see their potential for possible illness down the way. The third option that I've just came up with the other day is not freezing, but fathom. I had to have a F word because of fight and flight. I don't know whether that works, but I just threw it in there because to me, fathom means to work out, understand, and face my fear, and understand my fear and use all those tools I'm talking about. So fight, flight, and fathom to me are better tools than freeze, fight, flight, and freeze. Okay. I wanted to tell you about Gabor Mate because he wrote a book about when the body says no, the hidden cost of stress. It's a wonderful book. It's really informative, and it's got a lot of things in there that are really, really interesting. And I'd like to say that he talks about repressed anger leading to a disordered immunity, the inability to process and express feelings effectively, and the tendency to serve the needs of others before even considering one's own are common patterns in people who develop chronic illness. So he's a doctor, and he's given a lot of treatment to cancer patients, and he found that especially women with breast cancer actually had, all of them had a personality style of caring for others ahead of themselves. They would get breast cancer or a tumor in their breast or something, and then they would be more worried about the effect on their family than on themselves. And so that's how he figured that one out. He wishes that doctors would actually ask what's going on in a patient's life when they come in for treatment, because most doctors don't. Have you ever had a doctor ask you what's going on in your life when you became sick and ill? It's maybe worth it to go back and take a look what's going on. Anyway, there's another helpful resource. The top one here is Finding Joy, the trauma treatment technique that I've used as well as been given to. It's developed by Dr. Tia Schulten. She used to live in Sarnia, and her husband used to run the Sarnia Lambton Center Children for and Youth. She's doing it online and training practitioners to do it now, and it's a wonderful treatment. It's very similar to things like something like the EMDR therapy, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's a therapy that is not a talking therapy. It's a therapy that, well, there's some talking in it, but it's using different techniques it's almost like hypnosis in a way, I guess you could say, but not really. It's creative visualizations. So you're using visualizations to have positive and negative ones, and it's hard to explain. Anyway, if you really want to find out more about it, go and take a look at those web pages. And all the authors that for me are wonderful are Gabor Mate, Hansel, Eckhart Tolle, Pema Chodron, John Kabat-Zinn, Michael A. Zinger, Carl Jung, Marion Woodman, and there's lots more, but all those talk about this subject in a roundabout way sometimes, but also directly. And I think they're wonderful. So